Modern civilization depends on satellites far more than most people realize. Communication networks, GPS navigation, financial systems, weather forecasting, military coordination, internet services, and missile warning systems all rely on infrastructure orbiting silently above Earth. Space is no longer only a scientific frontier. It has become critical infrastructure. As nations become more dependent on orbital systems, space is increasingly turning into a strategic military domain. During the Cold War, space was mainly associated with exploration, prestige, and nuclear surveillance. The United States and the Soviet Union competed to launch satellites, send astronauts into orbit, and demonstrate technological superiority. At the same time, both sides understood that satellites also had military value. Orbital systems became essential for reconnaissance, communication, and early missile detection. Today, that military dependence has expanded dramatically. Modern armed forces rely heavily on satellites for daily operations. GPS systems guide aircraft, ships, drones, and precision weapons. Military communication satellites connect forces across continents instantly. Surveillance satellites monitor troop movements, missile launches, naval activity, and infrastructure changes around the world. Space systems now support nearly every part of modern warfare. This dependence creates vulnerability. If satellites are disrupted, damaged, or destroyed, military effectiveness can decline rapidly. Navigation systems may fail. Communications may weaken. Intelligence gathering may become slower or less accurate. Because of this, many governments now view orbital control as a major national security priority. Several countries are actively developing anti-satellite weapons, often called ASAT systems. These weapons are designed to disable or destroy satellites in orbit. Some use missiles launched from Earth to strike satellites directly. Others focus on electronic warfare, signal jamming, cyber attacks, or directed energy systems. The goal is not always destruction. In many cases, temporarily disrupting a satellite may be enough to reduce an opponent's capabilities during a conflict. China demonstrated one of the most significant anti-satellite tests in 2007 when it destroyed one of its own satellites using a missile. The test created thousands of debris fragments that remained in orbit for years. The event alarmed many governments because it showed how quickly military activity in space could create long-term risks for every nation using orbit. Russia has also tested anti-satellite systems in recent years. In 2021, a Russian anti-satellite missile destroyed an inactive satellite, generating another large debris field in low Earth orbit. The test forced astronauts aboard the International Space Station to take shelter temporarily because of collision concerns. These events highlighted how military actions in space can affect both civilian and scientific operations globally. The United States has responded by increasing investment in military space systems. In 2019, the US officially created the Space Force as a separate military branch focused on orbital security and space operations. Its responsibilities include satellite defense, space surveillance, missile warning systems, and protecting critical orbital infrastructure. At the same time, commercial companies are becoming major players in space infrastructure. Large satellite networks operated by private firms now provide internet services, imaging systems, and communication platforms globally. Some of these systems are already being used during military conflicts. This has blurred the line between civilian and military infrastructure in orbit. The war in Ukraine demonstrated this shift clearly. Satellite communication systems became critical for battlefield coordination, drone operations, and internet access. Commercial satellite networks proved capable of supporting military communications during active conflict. This showed how private companies can now influence geopolitical events directly through orbital infrastructure. Cyber warfare is also expanding into space systems. Satellites depend on software, communication links, and ground stations that may become targets for hacking or electronic attacks. Disabling a satellite through cyber intrusion may be cheaper and less visible than physically destroying it. Some experts believe future orbital conflicts may rely more on electronic disruption than explosive attacks. Electronic warfare systems can interfere with satellite signals without destroying the satellite itself. GPS jamming and spoofing technologies are already used in some conflict zones. Jamming blocks signals. Spoofing sends false signals designed to confuse navigation systems. These techniques can affect civilian aircraft, ships, drones, and communication systems, as well as military operations. Another growing concern involves orbital surveillance. Some modern satellites are capable of maneuvering close to other satellites in orbit. Governments often describe these systems as inspection satellites designed to monitor equipment or repair infrastructure. However, the same technology could potentially be used to interfere with, disable, or damage foreign satellites during a crisis. Low Earth orbit is becoming increasingly crowded. Thousands of active satellites now operate in shared orbital regions alongside old spacecraft and debris fragments. This congestion creates risks during both civilian and military operations. Any conflict involving satellite destruction could rapidly increase debris levels and threaten infrastructure belonging to many countries simultaneously. This creates a dangerous strategic problem. Unlike traditional battlefields, space is shared by everyone. Destroying satellites may damage global communications, navigation systems, weather forecasting, and scientific research far beyond the countries directly involved in conflict. One major orbital confrontation could affect the entire global economy. Several international treaties already exist regarding space activities, including the Outer Space Treaty signed in 1967. The treaty established that space should be used peacefully and prohibited nuclear weapons in orbit. However, many modern military technologies fall into legal grey areas that older agreements never fully anticipated. Space law has struggled to keep pace with modern military and commercial developments. Artificial intelligence is also becoming part of orbital warfare systems. AI may eventually help manage satellite networks, track threats, coordinate defense systems, and process surveillance information at enormous speed. Autonomous systems could become increasingly important as orbital infrastructure grows more complex and difficult for humans to manage manually. Missile defense systems are another reason space is becoming strategically important. Satellites play a major role in detecting missile launches through infrared monitoring systems. Early warning satellites provide governments with critical minutes of response time during potential attacks. Protecting these systems is considered essential for nuclear deterrence and national defense. The larger issue is that modern civilization now depends on space infrastructure every day, often without public awareness. Financial transactions rely on precise satellite timing systems. Aircraft navigation depends on orbital positioning networks. Emergency response systems use satellite communication constantly. Weather prediction relies on orbital monitoring systems. Space is deeply connected to life on Earth. The war above Earth is not necessarily a future event. In many ways, it has already begun through cyber attacks, electronic interference, anti-satellite testing, and strategic competition over orbital infrastructure. Nations are preparing for a world where controlling space may become as important as controlling land, sea, or air. The central challenge is preventing military competition from turning orbit into a dangerous battlefield. Once satellites begin being destroyed during conflicts, debris levels could rise rapidly and threaten every country using space systems. Unlike damage on Earth, orbital debris can remain in space for years or decades, creating long-term consequences for the entire planet. Space was once viewed mainly as a symbol of scientific progress and exploration. Today, it is increasingly viewed as strategic territory tied directly to economic stability, military power, and global communication. The nations that control orbital infrastructure may hold enormous influence over the future of modern civilization. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the forces shaping our future, be sure to explore our other documentaries, examining the technologies redefining modern civilization. And if you want to keep exploring the biggest questions about science, power, and the future of humanity, make sure to subscribe to the channel and join us for the next journey into the unknown.